Next, Mary Elrick of Waynesville, North Carolina, talks about how her identity was formed early as a result of an elementary school grammar lesson.
I believe in human rights, not African American rights, not gay rights, not women's rights. All people are created equal, except they're not. All men aren't even created equal, and women go unmentioned. When I was in 2nd grade, all the boys were out of the classroom for some gym class thing except for one. That left about a dozen girls, one boy, and our teacher, Miss Kubley, who wore saddle shoes and bobby socks over her stockings in winter. She told everyone to pick up his pencil. Miss Kubley, I asked, why didn't you say everyone pick up her pencil? She explained that even with just one boy in the room, one had to use the male pronoun. And this was a boy too puny to go to gym. Girls just had no pronoun power, or any other kind. At least Miss Kubley did not say, everyone pick up his or her pencil, too cumbersome. Or worse, everyone pick up their pencil, just downright wrong. The lesson I learned in school that day was I am not worth mentioning. That was so long ago that Miss Kubley's stockings had seams that looked like black lines drawn up the back of her legs. The stockings were attached by murderous metal and rubber devices that dangled at the ends of bouncing elastic strips. Unless you were a contortionist with masterful motor skills, you would most certainly fumble to secure your stockings at the back of your legs. Thank God for pantyhose and other improvements since then. Some of those improvements led to better lives for women. Despite the language lesson I had, or perhaps because of it, I founded and ran a small business for 15 years. It's a feat few women would have dreamed of back in the garter belt days. As a businesswoman, I was sometimes asked to join various groups of professional women, a request I always declined because these groups excluded men. I was also encouraged to apply for government grants as a minority business owner. Again, I declined. I am a person who is a woman. I expect to be worthy of mention. I will not discriminate against others, and I want no special treatment. My hope is that others will behave the same. An apocryphal story purports that President Obama, when applying to Harvard, neglected to check the box that would describe him as a man of color. He wanted, apparently, to get in on his merits. He wanted, like I do, to be judged by the same standards as everyone else. I cannot expect to have it both ways. I cannot be treated equally while I separate myself for the sake of privilege, even when I've had to suffer what others don't, like fumbling at the end of elastic strips for metal clips that snap up and whack me on the bone.
That's Mary Elrick of Waynesville, North Carolina. Next, we stay in-state and travel about 3 hours west to Louisville to hear from Elizabeth Martin. In a moment, WEKU's Julie Shindall talks to her about her belief in crossword puzzles. But first, we hear her essay read by Julie.
He is waiting for me, as poised and patient as a praying mantis. I walk over on tiptoes, young enough to tread as though I belong in a realm where it is possible that I could take flight. In my eyes, he is only my grandfather, a man much older than I will ever be, who likes his donuts sliced in half and spread with jelly. I do not realize that one day I will be tall because of the way he has to round his shoulders to fit through doorways, or that sometimes I will write in all capital letters because that is what he did. It will be years before I understand that mornings like these, spent with my grandfather's voice wrapped around me like a cape, will give me an unfailing belief in the power of crossword puzzles. We used to examine that black and white paper patchwork together, sitting in the blue rocking chair that was worn underneath his elbows. We would get to work early, filling in empty boxes with an ancient pencil. His pencils never had erasers. If he made a mistake, he made it once and was done with it. With the dictionary and an almanac, we would work until lunchtime, learning the names of foreign dignitaries and antonyms for obscure words. We were always so proud of that puzzle, pleased with the hard work and deliberate dedication it took to find every answer. Even today, I view a completed crossword puzzle as a palpable manifestation of acquired knowledge, a source of pride because of the enthusiasm, commitment, and thirst for knowledge it represents. Crossword puzzles also represent a deeper yearning, the desire to understand and be understood. Everyone knows that you fill out a crossword puzzle in capital letters. But my grandfather wrote that way even in his letters to me. His handwriting was indicative of the value he placed on comprehension. In conversations, he used words sparingly, and this taught me that when you speak, you make sure that every word counts. He showed me, too, that when you write, in crossword puzzles and elsewhere, you make sure that you have something clear and meaningful to say. As a high school senior, I have 18 years of pedagogical experience, and it seems that the feeling I got peering over my grandfather's shoulder is lost among the worksheets and standardized testing. My generation doesn't often do crossword puzzles, literally or figuratively. We don't appreciate learning for what it is. We too often simply collect facts and accolades. We don't realize that we could be gathering power, gaining footholds in the world around us, and finding a sense of ourselves and our purpose through asking questions and penciling the answers carefully in the appropriate boxes. If we did, we would find ourselves a little closer to understanding each other and a little closer to finding purpose in our lives. I believe steadfastly in crossword puzzles and their capacity to enlighten and inspire.
A uniquely themed profession of belief by Elizabeth Martin of Louisville, North Carolina, read by WEKU's Julie Schindall. Julie spoke with Elizabeth about her essay's supporting character.
My grandfather taught me a lot, obviously doing the crossword puzzle, but also he told wonderful stories about animals or magical situations, and they were always so funny and so engaging. But he also told a lot of stories that had deeper meanings that have sort of manifested themselves in my worldview. His stories were about transcending less significant concerns like grades and things like that, temporal concerns, and trying to find beauty in situations that may not be so good, and just realizing that positive things can come from almost anything you encounter.
In your essay, I really liked how you opened describing him as a praying mantis. Where did you get that image from?
When I think of him, he is probably one of the tallest people I've ever met, and so I think of his very long limbs, and that's where I get my height. Also, he had a very strong face, and so I think of that aspect of the image also applies well.
What is your favorite crossword puzzle to do today? Do you have a specific one that you like?
Oh, I don't know. I don't do the crossword puzzle as often as I'd like, but I use that more as sort of an approach for school and things like that. I work them sometimes in the paper when I see them and things, but it's sort of an ideological thing as opposed to a habit.
Elizabeth Martin's grandfather passed away when she was in 5th grade. She's now 18 years old and headed to college next year, where she plans to major in English. Still to come on This We Believe, a surprise ending to a story that teaches a lesson about taking the blinders off. Now, though, we'll hear from Amy Yellen of Arlington, Massachusetts. As an adult, she became inspired by a faith in something that many of us give up as we grow older.
As a kid, I didn't believe much in magic. I thought magicians were frauds and puppets were, well, puppets. I was even cynical about Santa. Not just because I'm Jewish, mind you, but because I could not understand how he could be in his house outside the local deli while at the same time courting children at his castle in the mall. As a young adult, I remained cynical, refusing to believe in UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, or food items that supposedly contained the face of Jesus. Rather, I believed there was a scientific explanation for everything. Perhaps this is because my father is a doctor, trained as a general practitioner first, then a psychiatrist. For a long time, I believed he could cure anything. All my father needed was a quick consult with his Merck Manual of Medical Disorders and the right drug, and everything would be okay. This is what I believed, at least, until my mother's illness. Just weeks after the terrorist attacks of September 11th, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Like the fall of the towers themselves, everything I believed about my parents up to this point would now begin to crumble. My mother would not live forever, and my father, rather than being the great healer I had imagined, would be revealed as only human. This is when I started changing my tune about magic. My mother died on August 26, 2002, 9 months after her cancer diagnosis. That morning, I awoke to a commotion of unusually noisy birds outside my childhood bedroom window, followed by tense voices coming from downstairs. I put on my robe and went to the kitchen, where I found my father and sister surrounding the green refrigerator that had been with our family since I was born. It was pulled away from the wall, its contents emptied, a brown liquid trickling from its insides. "It died," one of my sisters said, throwing a towel at me to help clean up. The timing was uncanny, I thought, this symbol of nourishment dying the same day as my mother. When I pointed this out to my father later, he said simply, "She hated that old thing." "But what about the birds?" I asked him. He looked annoyed. "What birds?" "Didn't you hear them this morning? They were so loud outside my window. Don't you think that meant something?" "Nah," he said, disappearing behind a cloud of pipe smoke. "They're always noisy." I returned to my apartment in Boston soon after the funeral. My father called almost immediately, wanting to talk about a bird. "It won't go away," he said, nearly giddy. "It lingers on the fence and watches me whenever I'm outside." I knew what he was thinking. Call it synchronicity, call it coincidence, call it overanalyzing, as my therapist once did. But if you notice something unusual that brings comfort or meaning to your life, why question it? These days, I look for magic wherever I can find it.
Amy Yellen of Arlington, Massachusetts, with her essay for This We Believe, a Women's History Month special from WEKU.